Thank you very much, Odelia. Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. I am very honored to join you today for my very first ISHMAEL Yamson and Associates Business Roundtable. I know it's the 10th one, but this is my very first one, and thank you for inviting me. Before I go into the presentation, and I'm cognizant that there are several audiences that we need to appeal to, I think it's worth me telling everyone a bit about myself, because hopefully some young people will, pick up on it and try to do what I've done and do it better. I like to describe myself as a UK-born, Ghana-raised citizen of Africa. I grew up here in Ghana in a challenging time in Ghana's history in the 1980s, where we had to survive a famine, amongst other things. It was in this period that I made up my mind that when I grew up, I wanted to be part of the solution, to do something that would make Africa, my homeland, a continent that my children would want to embrace rather than escape from. So since then, everything I've done in my professional life has been to try to get me to the point where I can be part of the solution. In my case, I've decided that helping small businesses find capital that they need to grow would be my way of contributing. And I think it's very important for everybody to pick something that they can work on to create impact. Because I like to say I've been inspired by the example of Kwame Nkrumah, who, when he was fighting for independence, he did not know whether he was going to be successful. But he did it anyway. He did not know whether, if he finished, he'd be allowed to, run the country and achieve what he wanted to do. But he did it anyway, because he thought for the opportunity for Ghana, or for the continent of Africa, to gain independence and develop with its own people and prove to the world that the black man can be a good custodian of his own affairs, it was worth doing. So that is pretty much what inspires me as well, and what led me to create Injaro, which is a firm that seeks to provide capital and grow sustainable African businesses. Let me figure out how to control this thing. So where do I point it? Or can the operator control from behind? Thank you. Okay. All right. So today I shall talk to you about how we can leverage agribusiness as a means for wealth creation. And my sister Fatima, in her intervention, almost deliberately decided not to mention the government at all. I, on the contrary, think that we cannot achieve any development at scale without involving government. And I think I'll talk about that later on. Is it this one? Which of the buttons? Okay, I think I've gone too far now. Oh, okay, thank you. So very briefly about Injaro, in 2009, in a partnership. I like to emphasize this because many young people today don't realize that it is actually better to hold arms with someone else on the journey than to start on your own. So it's a partnership between myself and a fellow African and Ivorian that we established in 2009. Over the years, we've been fortunate to be trusted by many investors. First, by international investors like the FMO, CDC, the Soros Economic Development Fund to manage capital, and more recently by our own Ghanaian investors after being in business for about 12 years. We currently manage around $100 million of capital across several funds, and we've deployed somewhere between 35 and 40 million of capital in agribusinesses across Africa. Ghana, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, and we've now made some investments in East Africa, Uganda and Kenya as well, and hopefully still growing. We've recently made a foray into Cabo Verde, where we are in a joint venture with the government of Cabo Verde to invest in SMEs. So we're trying to do our bit to really become a major player in to SMEs. Now, in terms of the agribusiness opportunity in Ghana, Ghana has over 18 million hectares of arable land. The Volta Lake is a big repository of water that can be used for production. We have enterprising youth who are capable, even if they're not too excited about agriculture, of actually engaging in this sector. And we have a growing population and demand for food. These are all good ingredients for developing or creating wealth via agribusiness. And today I just would like to talk about two main ways of us achieving this. And these are not things that you haven't heard of, but today we're going to talk a bit more about practical ways we can make this happen. First one, I'll touch on value addition. Cocoa, shea nuts, right? That's value addition for exports. But we also have value addition for local or Pan-African consumption. You know, through the power of Afrobeats, etc., people love Ghana jollof. Everyone knows what fufu is. When we think about what we can do with our staples in terms of value addition into packaged foods, we need to think first about how we sell it to the evolving Ghanaian housewife who has less time and therefore wants an easy-to-prepare meal and is using things like neat fufu, right? We can produce more such staples, more such packaged foods to help our local economy. But then we along with our culture, along with our Afrobeats, to other African countries to consume, and then to our own citizens in the diaspora who also want to keep on eating or having a taste of home as well, right? So value addition is going to be one approach. And then the other one, another easy one is import substitution. You know, we're importing about $2 billion worth of food every year into Ghana. What better proof of the fact that we have a local demand worth $2 billion that someone can plug into? We're sending it out every year, $2 billion every year of food. And there are people over here who are paying for it. So why shouldn't we use local industries and a local value chain to feed into this and make that money? So those are the two big ideas we'll be talking about today. Right, so I think Paul mentioned earlier today, and I have to say, yesterday I was reading the BFT, and on page 2, I noticed that a new organization has been set up, which is the African Association of Poultry Producers, 17 countries. It was set up in Morocco earlier this year. And I think Fatima first mentioned it, importing millions of frozen chicken every year. The numbers I got for 2019 are 308 million tons of broilers imported every year. And the other second example I had is $423 million worth of rice imported in 2019. And I thought it's worth taking us through the value chain for poultry so we can see just how much potential there is for job creation. Fundamentally, broiler is simply maize and soy converted into meat, right? I'm forgetting about all the other micronutrients, etc., but fundamentally that's what it is. A certain number of kilos of maize and soy gets converted into chicken. So by making a decision that we want to localize the broiler sector, this is what we're doing. We're stimulating a seed production sector. Why do we need seeds? Because our maize yields are about a fifth of what they are in the developed world. The reason why they can import chicken cheaper, we can import chicken cheaper, is because our maize is more expensive. So, and we've invested in one company in Ho that does high yielding seeds. We have to invest in seed production locally, right? Both for maize and soy, so you can quadruple or quintuple the yield. Once you've got those high-yielding seeds, then you can actually have more people producing the raw material. And now they're going to be able to do it profitably because surface area, they're going to be able to produce 5 times as much maize, 5 times as much income, probably 5 times as much employment, or maybe not so much, but the farmers will now be making more money. This is creating jobs for the farmer, for the people who are storing the maize, for people who are doing the distribution, and it's even creating employment for our newly created Ghana Commodity Exchange, because some of the maize will be traded over there to get it across to processors. The next phase, feed production. This is where we are converting the maize and soy into nutritious feed for broilers. This is going to create a whole new set of jobs. You're going to need engineers to run those plants, technicians. You're going to need a nutritionist to do the blending and the design of the constituents. You're also going to need people to do marketing. You're going to need people to go out and monitor the farms, the poultry farms, to make sure that the farmers are getting the best output. So you're going to create even more jobs over there. Now, elsewhere within the poultry value chain, you also have other items like the day-old chicks. Everyone knows about day-old chicks. But to produce a day-old chick, you need to produce something called a hatching egg, which is the egg that is put into the incubator. That's a whole different industry. To produce hatching eggs, you need to have a specific breed of male, of cock and then hens. These two breed, then they lay the eggs, and then the children that come out of those eggs are the ones that now lay or hatching eggs. We've invested in a business like this in Ivory Coast, which was bought off us by one of the leading poultry producers in the Ivory Coast. And later on, we'll see why this was possible in Ivory Coast, but we couldn't have done this in Ghana. Then downstream, we're going to need abattoirs, where you can kill these chickens, and then you can do some processing, package them very nicely, and then sell them in the shops, and all the other outlets, and hopefully even in our open markets with the right storage conditions if we have a cold chain in place. So, we did some analysis internally within Njaro, and we reckon that just by localizing or just by eliminating broiler imports, Ghana can create something like 800,000 jobs. Because every single step of this value chain, you need people to do the work. And it's not just low-value jobs. You're going to be hiring people from farmers all the way up to research scientists who are going to be churning out new, improved varieties of seeds. Now, I struggle to see how. I'm pretty sure our government knows this, because I'm quite new to agriculture. Before starting in Jaro, the last time I studied agric was in Form 3 in secondary school. And now I've become an agriculture investor, and I know this. We have PhDs in agriculture who have been involved in the Ministry of Agriculture. They know this stuff. So why is this thing not happening? I think I shall not... Okay, let's talk a little bit about the value addition. So let's take the case of cocoa. Someone asked earlier, how do we get to the point where we're getting a syndicated loan for cocoa? It's a question, I'm perplexed by that as well. Everybody knows that our cocoa farmers get something like 6% of the value of a bar of chocolate. 6% of the value of a bar of chocolate. And if we're exporting around $2 billion worth of cocoa, why can't we just set ourselves a very modest ambition of saying, rather than capturing 6%, let's capture 15% of the value of a bar of chocolate? We're not even going to go all the way to making chocolates for export. We're just going to add a bit more value so we have an intermediate product that we require every cocoa processor to export. And in so doing, we could add $3 billion annually to our economy. $3 billion, I think that number rings a bell. $3 billion just from adding additional value to cocoa. And this is where the government can come in and say, okay, from now we're not exporting beans. The only thing we're going to export is cake and butter or something, some other more advanced intermediate product of cocoa. Why aren't we doing this, right? Shea butter. And again, when we're talking about exports, we always have to focus on products for which we have a natural comparative advantage. Cocoa is one of them. Shea butter is another. This is one tree which people have tried to domesticate. They've tried to cultivate in other parts of the world. They've not been able to do it. For some reason, God decided to bless West Africa and some parts of East Africa with this tree, which takes about, I think it takes something like 80 or 90 years to mature. So even if you want to try and domesticate it, we still have a long lead time where we can exploit it before other countries can come up. Shea butter is one of the premium ingredients for a $500 billion global cosmetics industry. We are still exporting of our nuts raw. And when small businesses are trying to raise money to add value locally, they're struggling. So these are all things which, with a concerted effort between the government, the private sector, and the NGOs that are supposed to be helping us, our development partners that are supposed to be helping us, we should be able to figure out something to create some sustainable value addition in these two crops. We're not trying to compete with them on things where they don't have the raw material. These are ones where we have the raw material, and if we say we want to be a more climate-friendly planet or climate-friendly global citizens, we should think about the global or the climate, the green footprint, the carbon footprint benefits of adding more value locally before shipping things out. If I use the example of cashew nuts, today we export all of our cashew nuts to India or Vietnam. Do you know what happens when it goes to India or Vietnam? They throw away 80% of the weight of the product. That's what they mean. That's what happens when you process a cashew nut. You're throwing away 80% and leaving that in India, and then taking the 20%, shipping it from India to Europe or North America, Then it gets packaged in those lovely plastic bags. And some of it, guess what, gets exported right back into Ghana. And the same people who are buying this product in Europe are saying that they care about the carbon footprint of the food we eat. Food for thought. Right, so now let's talk about locally consumed stable foods. This is one opportunity that we really seem to be missing, right? I remember when I was a kid, we used to have a product called maize break. Does anyone remember what maize break is? This was, yes, I'm showing my age. Yes, recently crossed a certain milestone. Yes, but I am showing my age. Maize break. But I mean, in America, etc., they're eating cornflakes. That's what they decided to make with their maize. We used to make maize break. I don't know what happened to maize break. Let us be confident in developing our own food products and promoting them so that we can eat those things as our own alternatives. Whether it's Hausa cocoa that we package in a way that is more palatable and you can find easily on shelves in restaurants, shelves in supermarkets. These are the things that we need to do. Plantain. I mean, plantain chips, one of the most popular snacks in Ghana, and also outside in the rest of the world. I am yet to meet a non-African that you give plantain chips to that doesn't love it. But to what extent are we actively adding value to this, both for local consumption and also, dare we say, let's be lions, export it, promote it. As you're selling whiskey or you're selling shatawale should be talking about plantain chips and how they're great. So that all those people bopping their heads to Afrobeats are also, eating some Afro food, right? And helping us make some money. I think we just need to be more aggressive in the way we think about these things. I just want to go back and talk about the chicken again, because some people might say, yes, this is some highfalutin idea from some guy who doesn't really know anything. But when it comes to the localization of the poultry sector, it has been done. I'm not suggesting anything new. All I'm saying is let's go and copy our cousins next door in Cote d'Ivoire. Because when it comes down to it, transformation only happens with a plan. And the type of plan we need for wealth creation has to be focused on this goal of achieving a structured, productivity-led ecosystem that links all the parties in the value chain to markets. When we started this discussion, I spoke about $2 billion of imported food. That is a market, right? So you know that there's $2 billion worth of purchasing power. Now we just need to work backwards. What is a price point we should be targeting? Who are the actors that we need to produce all the inputs to make that final product? How do we make each one of those actors more efficient so that we can meet that? And this is exactly what the Ivorian government did back in 2005, where the government of Ivory Coast sat down with the Association of Poultry Producers and said, right, we're signing a contract. We, the government, are going to ban the importation of poultry products or apply import taxes, and the proceeds of those taxes will be used to support you, the poultry production sector. But what you have to do in return is you have to commit annually to reduce the price. Commit annually to reducing the production price of chicken. So I want to see the price of locally produced chicken falling every year. Otherwise, I'll lift the protection that I'll lift the import bans and I'll let the imports back in again. Private sector says, fine, we're up for this challenge, right? And what happened? Within 4 years, they saw a 2 times increase in the production, in the output of chicken. In the first 6 years, 39,000 jobs were created. And when we look at the decrease in the amount of imports between 2005 and 2015, 93% reduction in imports, right? 93% reduction in imports. People, I don't know what the number is. If it's 400 million of imports right now, we're going all the way down to less than $100 million of imports, if you do what they did. But look, that took about 10 years. And just an aside, like I mentioned, our fund invests across... Hello? Test. Okay. Our fund invests across several African countries, so we have the luxury of comparing the feasibility of a business plan in Ghana versus Ivory Coast versus Mali versus Burkina Faso. And when people ask me, I always say, I would rather invest in poultry in Ivory Coast than invest in poultry in Ghana, because at least in the Ivory Coast, a local business has a real chance of winning of being profitable. Whereas in Ghana, the struggle is incredibly, incredibly tough. And this is because in Ghana, we have not done what the Ivorians have. So anyway, we saw we've got the goal in mind. We've seen what the Ivorians achieved. But I started to think about what are the elements of the secret sauce, or not so secret sauce, that made them successful. The first thing is, it was market-led, right? They sat down, they saw that they were importing a certain amount of poultry into the country, which was costing them a certain amount of money. So they said, this is a market that we want to localize. The second thing they did is they set commercial objectives. And I think this is really, really critical, because it is very, very rare that you hear our government launching a plan or being involved in a plan where they're talking about some real commercial milestones, some real commercial targets. In the case of the Ivory Coast, they said, we want to see the price of broilers reducing by a certain percentage every year, or else all the good stuff we're doing for you ends. Third point, you need the government to be supportive. And when I talk about the government here, I do not mean one government. It should not be NDC supports it, when MPP comes, they pull back support, or MPP supports it, NDC comes and they say, we need all of our governments to support this. Now, and the fourth point is that it needs to be centrally designed and coordinated. Because we've got several actors in the value chain, and you do need someone who will act as the arbiter if there's any conflict, and who's also making sure that everybody in the value chain is being treated fairly and has a chance to make a profit. And sometimes you're going to find that certain parts of the value chain need to be subsidized for longer. So it is only when you have that central coordination, someone can have the oversight of all the elements in the value chain, that we can make sure that the whole engine works together. One thing that the Ivorians did that I forgot to mention is, when they took these, when they applied these import levies on broilers, they used that money to create tailored financing solutions for actors in the value chain. One of the things they created was a guarantee scheme, which was used to support SME producers. And then the second thing they used the money for was to actually finance small businesses also within the poultry sector, right? So this world relies on money to move. So once you've done the design, it is very, very important to have these tailored financing solutions. Here in Ghana, I think we have one of these elements. We've got Gersal, which is already operational. And there are things that can be done to enhance Gersal and support other financial institutions to provide support along the value chain. And the sixth element that I noticed is the periodic convening of all the actors in the value chain to actually review the results. How are we doing against the milestones? What are the problems that need to be resolved? Where do we need to apply more effort to make sure that we're getting to the final solution? And mutual accountability. And mutual over here means the government can crack the whip on the private sector if it isn't performing, but it also has to be vice versa, where the private sector can say to the government, you were supposed to do X, Y, and Z. The policy was there, but there was no implementation. Why? Right? And not get accused of not supporting the party in power simply because you criticize something which, if it works well, is for the benefit of everybody. I think we really need to start being able to separate messengers from messages, even if those messages are critical. We really need to be able to do this more as a country if we want to progress. So, the critical success factors, planning. When I talk about coordination in the agriculture sector, I can tell you that there are a number of different NGOs we have in this country with different projects. 2-year project, a 3-year project, bringing money in to come and chip at different parts of different problems and not really achieving anything concrete is just incredible, And when I talk about coordination over here, I think there's a lost opportunity where the government, in partnership with the private sector, can say to all these development partners, fine if you want to come and do your project in the country, but I want 20% of the money to go into this pot, which I'm using for these focus areas, one of which is localizing broiler production. Why can't we do that? I think Rwanda does this quite well. Why can't our government also be bold and say, we have this objective, we're not letting you just come and do any random program. You have to contribute to this thing, which is actually driving national growth. So that planning and coordination is very, very important. And the KPIs, commercially driven KPIs, productivity-driven KPIs have to be defined from the onset. And we should not have a case of any government being able to set its own marking scheme. Independently designed and defined KPIs that everybody has to be held accountable to. That is the way we make it happen. Second point, persistence. This is very important because when you look at the Ivorian example, they started in 2005, but it took a whole 10 years for them to see that 90% reduction in imports. And that means, if that were in Ghana, it would go through at least 2 or maybe 2.5 different presidential regimes. So I think politicians will not like me for this. Politicians sometimes need to not be so personal about who takes credit for the development in some cases, because this is what prevents them from putting in place any plan for development that goes more than 4 years. Everybody wants to do something where they'll see rapid results, they get re-elected, and then they can come back to, for more to do more, as they like to say. But sometimes the plan you need has to be a plan that spans a longer period of time. Otherwise, you're not really going to achieve anything meaningful. So we really need to be looking at longer term plans and independent bodies that can actually coordinate and drive these plans. I think that's enough on the persistence point. And then focus. And this, I think, is very important because I think we operate in a country where the efficiency or the ability of government to implement projects successfully, and I'm not talking about any particular party. I like to be able to work with all governments, so I don't want to criticize any particular government. For me, it's Ghana first. That's my philosophy. Let's come, and because they, from a political standpoint, want to satisfy so many different constituencies, when they come into agriculture, they'll say we're focusing on focus. So the word is focus. Then they'll list about 12 different things that are the focus. How can you focus on 12 different things with limited resources and limited capacity to implement? I really think that all governments should sit down and say, look, for the next 15 years, these are our top 2 or 3 priority areas. We're not saying we'll completely ignore the other ones, but 80% of our money or our resources, human and financial, are going to go into these 2 or 3 sectors. I think localizing the broiler sector should be one of them. As for the other 2, it is up to the government to decide. But the potential the jobs you can create from localizing the broiler sector are so significant that I don't think it should be ignored, right? So focus, and let focus be real focus. So I think coming to the end, having a dynamic agribusiness sector is unavoidable if you really want to create wealth in Ghana, because a large proportion of our population is involved in it. But we cannot forget that to achieve this, we need to be focusing on market-led, productivity-driven strategies, which are backed by long-term government, I say long-term multi-government support. Now, and I'll reiterate again, it's very important that we focus on 2 or 3 areas and really direct our resources on making those things work, right? We really need to do this. And then finally, reiterating again the importance of being very long-term in our planning, in our execution, and our tracking of results. So I think with that, I'll stop and say thank you for listening, and open to hearing any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been an amazing value chain, import substitution, seed production, taking a look at the chicks market and looking at the abattoir as well, and saying that we need to have a focus as a country if we really want to strike it in a particular space and really make it. About 3 years ago, I interviewed the Vice Chancellor for the University of Kigali. And so I asked him that in AFTA, what is Rwanda taking to the market? And he said it simply, and it's something that is on the street. Everybody in Rwanda knows that they are taking service, because there are people who don't have land, and for them currently what they can really take to the market is service. And so their focus is on the service sector. But every time I say we have a lot as a country, and so sometimes all the ideas really get scattered. I'd like us to stay focused still on the agric sector and ask a few more questions before we come to the arts and culture and tourism conversation, so that we don't get it mixed up. Yeah. So I'm open. Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Okay, so interesting conversation that we're having about agriculture. But I just want to, it's not a question, but to point out something. I think we are always putting research, and I mean scientific research, on the back burner of agriculture. And that is not going to work for the agriculture sector. I'm a research scientist. And I think every time we have these conversations, we fail to see the import and the impact of science. It's always R&D. It's always mentioned as a little aspect of whatever that we are doing. The focus of agriculture is a product. That product is developed through scientific research. If we are talking about climate resilience, we're talking about high yielding, we're talking about nutrition. It all comes down to the research scientists in the research institutions, in the universities. I saw the plan, I saw NGOs, I saw government, I did not see research institutions. Private sector is not engaging enough with research institutions. The work we do as research scientists is donor-driven. It means that the needs, yes, the donor has their needs, they have their objectives, and they will meet it on a broader perspective. But Ghana, we have our challenges. And to drive it, we need to partner with the research institutions. Private sector needs to come to the universities. We need to talk. Maybe we are not given, and I know the challenge is that sometimes when we speak science, it's like, oh, what's the importance, the impact? We don't really see it. It's in the shelves in our labs, and in our libraries, and in our journals. But private sector needs to come down to the research institutions and sit down and talk. This is our goal. What can we do? Yes, we talked about seed production, but the seed production is driven by the variety that is released. So if you have a bad variety released, essentially you have a seed, but when you plant it, it doesn't give you what you want. You have improved your seed sector, but have you improved the variety that is released? Have you invested? Have you sat down with the research and say, this is what I want. Can you deliver? This is how much I am investing, and we will deliver. So all I'm trying to say is that we have had these conversations about agriculture, not once, not twice. But we still keep putting it as R&D, and we keep putting the scientific community as we are like at the bottom of everything. But we are actually the driving force. Any country that does not invest in research, whether it's economy, science, we are not going anywhere because there is no linkage. We are thinking, oh, this makes sense, let's do it. But how are we engaging our scientists, our researchers who have the PhDs, who are studied enough? So let's bring that to the forefront. When we talk about agriculture, let's bring that to the forefront.
I couldn't agree with you more that scientific research is at the foundation of any agricultural strategy. Indeed, my fund has invested in a seed production company which relied on foundation seed coming from CSIR. And we can have a conversation afterwards about the experience over there. But needless to say, we got to a point where the seed company, which was only supposed to be providing, the final seed that was going to be used, ended up having to breed parental lines itself because the parental lines they're getting from or they had to order it from IITA because what they're getting from a local research was not of a uniform and high quality. But all this goes back to the same point that I'm making. If you have some central coordination, which is driven by the market, ultimately that seed production company will find a way to find a scientist. Even if they can't rely on CSIR, they're going to look for you and say, Madam, please come and work with me in my seed production company, do the research for me so I can get a competitive advantage. But that being said, I also have to say that our research institutions probably also need to do a bit more of outreach, of marketing. You know, do a once a year conference and invite all sorts of small businesses to come and see all the great technologies, because I know that there's a lot of great stuff sitting on your shelves, but you're not marketing it enough, and also a lot of it is not industry oriented enough. As a former engineer, I know we, as scientists, we have a tendency to research things because it is elegant or it is stimulating scientifically, not necessarily thinking about, well, instead of having 8 features, well, the market only cares about these 3 features. So let's focus on these 3 and sell. Scientists don't always think like that, so we need that closer linkage to make it all work better.
Fatima, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I love the passion that you presented, but let's also be honest, and I don't want to just take the last part of what you say. We work very closely with CSIR in our part of the AGI, and we work very closely with you. But to date, I've been here, I'm saying 30 years, I haven't seen the CSIR or any scientist come up in the media and say that, we have this offering for cassava, or we can actually use this particular grain right now, take into account we have El Nino, or we have a big issue because of starving losses. It's a two-way street, right? And mainly for the corporates in Ghana, majority are multinationals, and you do know that they all have also their internal policies and budgets and everything else that they want to work with. I know for a fact Guinness Ghana, for example, had made an intentional policy where they say that they were import dependent. 80% of everything that went into producing anything out of Guinness Ghana was imported. Today it's the reverse. 80% of whatever Guinness Ghana is using is from the local market. So definitely they did do their own trials, to be able to see whether, like you say, the varieties work for them. So my question, I would actually go back to the scientist, because we tend to be faced with a lot of issues every day. Fertilizer is one of the biggest challenges. We know that Ghana didn't even have fertilizer, I think was it 2 or 3 months ago? We had no fertilizer. The world right now, especially Africa, has a shortage of fertilizer because of what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine war. What have the scientists done? What have you been able to come in and say, you know what? We should be able to use cow dung or whatever else, because fertilizer is a new phenomenon. We have been able to have other best practices that are still being done by our farmers in the villages without the need of fertilizer. So has, I don't want to name the institutes, but have any of the science institutes come up with solutions to this? So what I'm saying is it's okay to, and I'm with you, and like you say, we really support the fact that it should be on the forefront, it should be the first thing to speak about. But it takes 2 to tango. So I would put the onus and the task on the scientists to say, these are our Ghanaian problems, these are our own African problems, and these are the solutions that we have to these existing. And that's something I would say, because science is proof of concept. We people who come out with things out of the air, you have proof of concept. So I believe if you did walk into any organization today, to put players and say that. And very quick, just for to add on to what we talked about, in terms of the poultry situation, just an update for everybody on the poultry sector is I'm the master plan for the poultry industry, and the reason is, again, we continue to sit, and that's the reason I don't government, because there's been so much they can do or want to do. So private sector is driving this, and we have brought in all the players in terms of soya bean producers, because we continue to be dependent on the mindset that if there is no maize, that there's no poultry, yet soya bean is going to waste, we're not consuming it, A lot of it is going into the oil paint industry to produce oil. So what can we do to now bring in other kinds of crops and foods that can feed the world? So what we are working on now is not wait for the government to come and give us solutions. We as the private sector have decided to take this, create a master plan, make it self-regulated, and then go and give it to the minister and say, here we are, make whatever you need. We are trying to be more proactive rather than sitting and waiting for government to do things.
Any more questions?
You know, I want to chip in here about what the scientists do. And I have one company example, Monsanto. Monsanto is a science and R&D company. And what makes them a global success is marketing. They have understood how to take the science and turn it into a brand that generates massive profits. In our context, our scientists want to remain pure. So I've interacted, for example, with CSIR, where promotions are by scientific work produced. Promotions are not linked to the commercialization of scientific work. So there's a problem. And yet, if you go to India, there's also CSIR in India. Guess what? Every problem they solve, they own 7% of it forever. Not the Achimota forest forever. They own 7% of it forever. So whether India goes to space, whatever they solve, and I think our scientists now need to also develop those commercial skills and turn the institutes also into companies. And let the science be an important part, but not everything that you do. I work for Unilever. The scientists producing tomato, who are the biggest tomato, we are the biggest tomato company in the world. The scientists are paid more than the marketing people. And the budget for science and R&D is bigger than the marketing budget. So, all I'm saying is that don't bemoan. I think we just need to rethink the paradigm in which we have placed the work we do around science, research, and development. Should we start? Nana, if you start, we must start.
Hello. Hello. It's the time of the youth. It's quite interesting. This last week, I was engaged in a discussion and glad that the experts are really thinking that way. Thanks. I'm sorry I missed news of yours. But, if you get somebody from this like other engagements in the morning, you've been stretching before coming. But there are two things I want to say. I think absolutely we missed a very big opportunity in our planting for food and jobs, thinking that we can do everything. I personally believe that in Ghana, we don't have to think about planting, yams. Fortunately, yam, you know that the same home is where they plant the yam every year. All that we need is water, and we get it. So, but then we miss the boat by not focusing. There are only 3 crops in the country: the maize, rice, and soya. Why don't we get these things done cheaply? Immediately we have our meat. Saying, because once you have this, you have, and the good things about that is that we have also a comparative advantage. The type of rice, especially in the northern regions, we can be within 2 years self-sufficient in this and that partnership, and we missed it. And then on the other side, definitely cocoa, cashew nuts, and shea butter value chain. And this country within 5 years, because we would then have a lot of dependent value chain system. So I agree with you. Now comes the second one. That's why I stood up as ISHMAEL and Associates. Interestingly, and if you don't take it up, I was talking with my assistant that some of us, poor as we are, will establish a national development forum which will meet at the British Council, not because we love the British, but because of the centrality of it. Or we must find not a British one, but is that a place which is cheap enough around the British Council, because I know that you can have it for 2 hours for 3,000. So find me something cheaper, Ghanaian. But we must start putting this into the media, into the development thinking, so that those guys, the two tribes, NPP and NDC, they are so crazy. They will come up with their manifesto and they say that we are elected on our manifesto, and then everything can go. We must force some agenda between now and the end of next year that this will be achieved, the focus. And I think that we must create a monthly development forum and start putting these ideas so that we will create a demand for it from the populace. Other than that, these two tribes, all that they want is access to government power, and that gives them, no matter how broke the country is, they have sufficient to live well by rough or good means. So the two things I want to say is that the idea of focusing is so important. Of course, as a development economist, planning long-term and other things. But once you focus, you will soon get them there. But we must find a way of bailing the cat in Ghana. And that must be our strategy. I may leave a bit earlier, but I believe that if we focus on agric and tourism, it has been done. We are not reinventing the wheel. In fact, the World Bank did the studies about 15 years ago that Ghana, focusing on agric, focusing on tourism, and then small-scale industry, but one based upon value addition. Other things will be complementary. Thank you so much for this and contribution. But you give me your card, knowing that you have money. I'll visit you because we must chop something before we die.